Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name is Bobby. Guys, a different type of video today. Matter of fact, for the people that have been following me from day one, this is classic content yet again. Today we're going to react to the result of the longest meat ban in history. This will happen again on the channel, The Maybe Theory. So for people that don't know, way back, I actually went vegan. Yes, shame on me. For 4 years straight, I ate a plant-based diet, if you want to call it that. Exclusively plants, no meat, no dairy, no eggs, none of those sorts, until I destroyed my health single-handedly and then started eating a carnivore diet at first. And now to this very day, I'm still eating a heavily animal-based diet, if you want to call it that. I'm predominantly eating animals. This is my way of living, and this is the only way of living that actually makes me feel healthy. If I'm not eating any meat, any eggs, any dairy, I deteriorate rapidly. So therefore, thank God for meat. Guys, before we jump into the video, do me the favor and like the video if you enjoy my content. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the links in the description box below to further support my work. And now, with no further ado, let's have a look.
I think that we are doomed through eternity to repeat this program, as to do it again and again and again.
What happens when a country bans meat for over 1,200 years? With documentaries like the Twin Study and What the Health promoting a primarily, if not entirely plant-based diet, it's clear that the future of humanity, for some people, is a plant-based one. But what would that type of future society actually look like? Would we be taller on average? Shorter? Would we be healthier? Some of us see health benefits transitioning off of the traditional American diet and onto a plant-based one, but some of us also see benefits from switching to an animal-based or fully carnivore diet. To get an idea of what could happen in a primarily plant-based future.
Yeah, well, as someone that did the vegan diet for over 4 years, I can only speak for myself, of course. But that being said, we have thousands and thousands of ex-vegans coming out reporting exactly the same findings like myself here, which is that their health deteriorated after a while. And therefore, those initial reports of people saying that they feel better now on the plant-based diet, I do not doubt whatsoever, because most people come from a standard American diet and then they jump onto a vegan diet which excludes most processed junk food. And then they use it ultimately as a fasting mimicking diet, which makes them feel better initially, as I said. But then usually after 1 year, the nutritional deficiencies come creeping in and they ignore it if they are so-called ethical vegans. Then the whole supplementation starts. Then after a while, they reintroduce certain meat replacements, soy schnitzels and whatnot. But it's downhill from there for most people. And after year 3, the latest, most people drop out of veganism, no matter what social media tries to tell you. The dropout rate is roughly 80% after year 3. You can look that up. Most people see that they simply cannot sustain the so-called vegan diet. And therefore, when the creator of the video here says that some people seem to do well on a plant-based diet, others on a more carnivorous diet, yeah, initially, but show me the long-term vegans. We all know where this is ending.
In the past. Specifically, we can look at Japan, where meat was banned for 1,200 years.
Oh, well,
How did putting extreme restrictions on meat affect Japanese society? How did it affect the Japanese people's health? And despite fantasizing of a meatless utopia, how well was the meat ban actually observed?
Yeah, probably not well at all. No chance they didn't eat any meat for 1,200 years. No
Historically,
chance.
The peoples of ancient Japan were hunters of deer, wild boar, birds, and other animals, and ate nose to tail, just like other meat-eating cultures. But as Buddhism was introduced in the 5th century, the idea of eating meat became less and less favorable due to the belief that you or your family members could be reincarnated as an animal. Beginning in 675 AD, Emperor Tenmu placed a ban on eating cows, horses, dogs, monkeys, and chickens. Pork was later added to the list of forbidden meat.
They are not for eating.
For the next 1,200 years, the people of Japan would rely on a diet completely void of animal products altogether. Just kidding. That's a lie. That didn't actually happen.
Exactly.
The Japanese diet
I
still
wouldn't
contained
think.
fish and other seafood, which included dolphins and whales, but for the most part, the diet consisted of rice and vegetables.
There you go. Yeah, but that's exactly the point, because vegans oftentimes cite certain demographics of people that haven't been eating meat, quote unquote, certain blue zones where they are predominantly plant-based, etc., you name it. But in reality, those people, of course, ate meat. They ate animals. So now, if there was a meat ban imposed on those people, and let's say most of them adhered to those rules just for the sake of the argument, they didn't eat land animals, but after all, they were eating whales and all kinds of seafood. And one could argue, especially back in those days, eating seafood predominantly or even exclusively would have been the healthiest choice you could do. Because ultimately it boils down to eating animals or not eating animals. This is really the whole debate topic here. There is no such thing as a plant-based diet, a meat-centric diet, an animal-based diet. It boils down to, are you eating animals and their secretions, yes or no? And therefore, if you do, you still adhere to your physiology, your biology, and what it demands. Because if you look into the anatomy of a human being, you will, of course, big surprise, find out that we are omnivorous, highly carnivorous beings. That's just what it is. And every time you go against your species-specific diet, you're ultimately following an ideology. And that is what veganism is. It is an ideology. It is a belief, ultimately, that is not grounded in reality. Similar to Buddhism. In Buddhism, people believe that they're going to get reincarnated as some sort of animal. And therefore, you don't want to eat grandma. But because there is absolutely no way of proving it, it stays just a belief. And you can believe as many things as you want to. If they're not grounded in reality, you will ultimately suffer. I quote the great Mike Tyson when he said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And what that means is you're preoccupied with your thoughts, you're thinking of certain scenarios, but it's not the reality. Then you get punched in your face and all of a sudden reality hits you, so to speak, quite literally. And the same applies as well to your biology. I was an ethical vegan back in the day. I truly thought that it's not right to kill animals. That was really my brainwashing, my Disney programming back in the day. But ultimately, I suffered biologically, and therefore I had to conclude that I cannot continue with this diet, with this lifestyle, with this ideology, with this religion, call it what you will. But anyways, I went on a tangent here. Ultimately, what I just wanted to say is that those people, even though they adhered to their government standards of not eating specific animals, they still kept on eating animals, especially whales. And therefore, they got all the preformed nutrients that you cannot find within plants. I mean, even vegans would have to agree that back then we didn't have B vitamin supplements, B12 supplements, and what else you may need on a vegan diet. And therefore, what were those people supposed to do?
But as you could probably guess, the meat ban wasn't as adhered to as you'd think. The makers of the recent Netflix documentaries would be shocked to hear that despite the ban on meat, a lot of people still wanted to eat it. Of the minority that still found it socially acceptable to indulge in meat were none other than emperors, shoguns, and aristocrats.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it boils down to, because the kings and the emperors, the highest ruling class of the society, always ate meat. Even if you look into the caste system, the Hindu caste system, where vegetarianism is the absolute norm ultimately, the Brahmins, the highest of that class, ate meat as well. It was even reserved for those people. So how can it be so evil? How can it be so spiritually wicked if the highest elites, so to speak, eat it after all? And this is really what it boils down to. This is malnourishment of the peasantry. If you look into the gulags, the Soviet labor camps, one of the first things that happened over there is, of course, as well to remove meat. So therefore, yes, what the video stated in the beginning is absolutely accurate there. It is an ever-repeating cycle where the rich remove meat, nutritionally dense foods, from the general population. It has been going on forever, and veganism is the same scam.
Going on hunts and eating the animals that they harvested.
Yeah,
the shogun would send cranes that were caught by his hawks to the emperor to enjoy. There are even accounts of one shogun receiving beef pickled in sake from the Hikone clan, which was delivered marked as medicine. We'll talk more about this later. Another example has to do with milk. During the meat ban, drinking a cow's milk was considered the same thing as drinking its blood. Despite this, one emperor would periodically have
which
dairy
it basically
cows
is.
delivered to the...
Yeah, so not many people know this, but ultimately milk is filtered blood. It is the blood, the nutrition of the female, in this instance, of course, filtered through the glands in the breast, becoming then milk. And therefore, the nutritional profile of milk is not so different of blood. Of course, you're lacking heme iron, you're lacking creatine and carnosine as well. And it has obviously lactose, some milk sugar. But other than that, it is almost identical, meaning it has almost all the nutrition that blood has as well.
The palace, milked, and then returned to their farm after. And if you're wondering why they did this, milk would have spoiled if you ever tried to deliver it long distances before refrigeration was invented.
Yep.
And as if the upper crust's hunger for meat weren't telling enough, the initial orders to ban meat weren't well observed by the public at first, and the laws needed to constantly be reinforced until finally the average Joe or Jill found the thought of eating meat unclean. But to get to this
brainwashing.
point,
and that's something that you truly have to question, of course. Why did they have to reinforce it over and over again? Why did it come so naturally, one might say, to the people to simply continue eating meat? It is, yet again, a big shocker, big surprise, because it is our species-specific diet. If you read the book Weston A. Price, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, you will see what somewhat still indigenous people ate predominantly. And it is always the same with all of those tribal people. Meat, whole animals, are the majority of their food consumption. In a normal society of people that hasn't been brainwashed by the elites, as they just described here, people would go out, fish, hunt, and simply live their rural life. Completely normal, because yet again, for the 1000th time, it is their species-specific diet. So now removing meat, that food of the human being, is the same endeavor as if you would try to remove meat from a cat. A cat, on the other hand, cannot really be brainwashed as a human being because it does not respond to our wording, to our dogma, to our theology, etc. And therefore you would simply have to remove the meat and not feed the cat meat. The cat would still go out and hunt a mouse, for example, right? And the same will always apply to the human being because it is our biology, it is our nature, it is our species-specific diet, it is how God created us. Pick and choose whichever terminology you may like, and therefore it is a artificially enforced doctrine onto the human being, and this is why it leads yet again to suffering, and this is why the human being will always go out of its way to find meat somehow, be it through drinking milk then, be it through hunting, be it through fishing, doing something in order to get its proper nutrition.
pretty strict rules needed to be set. For example, it got to the point where if a person ate meat in the Heian period, they needed to fast for 3 days before they could enter a Buddhist temple. Then it got progressively worse. During the Kamakura period, people needed to fast for 100 days after eating meat.
What?
Anyone who ate with someone that ate meat needed to fast for 21 days. And anyone who ate with someone who ate with someone that ate meat needed to fast for 7 days.
Yeah, there you go.
After these
It's
rules were
basically
initiated,
punishment.
eating meat became taboo for the most part, at least among the working class citizens. Until 1872, when the Meiji Emperor celebrated the new year by eating meat, which was met with strong opposition, when a month and a half later, 10 monks reportedly stormed the palace in an assassination attempt, under the belief that by eating meat, the emperor was destroying the soul of the Japanese people. The thing about this is that Japan was also in the process of opening up to the rest of the world, ending its period of isolation. The Japanese began engaging in international trade, meeting foreigners, and doing business with them, and it was at this point that some pretty undeniable differences were observed. Undeniable differences that we should take into account, especially for advocates of adopting a primarily plant-based diet for humanity in the future. During the Kofun period, right before the introduction of Buddhism and subsequent ban on meat, the average height of Japanese men was 163 centimeters.
Still very small, of
about
course.
5'4". At the end of the Edo period, after 1,200 years of extremely restricted meat consumption, the average height for men shrank to a staggering 157 centimeters, or
6
about 5'2".
centimeters.
After Japan began including more meat in their diet, like pork and beef, the average height increased. For reference, today the average height of men in Japan is about 171 centimeters, or about 5'7". That's an increase of 5 inches, or almost 13 centimeters from 1872 to today.
Yes, and this is not surprising whatsoever, because if you have a lack of nutrition, of course you won't develop as well. Very, very surprising facts here today. Actually, you can look into some studies as well if you want. There is the farm study from 1989, which concluded that children that were fed a vegetarian diet were on average by age 10 a centimeter shorter almost and a kilogram lighter than their meat-eating peers. Then we have the UCL study from 2021, and this one concluded that children that were following vegan diets were on average 3 centimeters shorter and had 4 to 6% lower bone mineral density. And on top of that, they were 3 times more likely to be deficient in vitamin B12. In 2022, we had the Target Kids cohort study, where they observed around 9,000 children and came to the conclusion that they found an association of an underweight status in those vegetarian children. And of course, you have plenty of more studies or simply real-life examples, as we just heard here in this video. Yes, if you have nutritional deficiencies, you're obviously not going to develop very well. Why is that so? Because you are what you eat. Yes, your body is composed of what you put into your mouth. And therefore, if the food that you're putting into your mouth is lacking in nutrients, you won't develop as well.
Just this year, 2024, the Asahi Shimbun said that the key factor of this reduction in height was specifically due to the meat ban, and also stated that, quote, denied access to a major source of protein, Japanese people could not grow to their physical potential. But
yes,
what else happened in Japanese society during the 1,200 years that meat was banned? This is, to me, the most interesting part of the story, and it's really telling in terms of what nutrients the human body needs, and also what could happen if humanity as a whole restricts meat
and keep in mind, just another quick interjection here, keep in mind that the height on average dropped significantly. However, those people were not vegans by any means. They were eating a plant-based diet, if you will, because they had to abstain from certain meats. But nevertheless, they were still consuming fish here and there and whatnot. So they were not vegans, and still their height decreased tremendously. Now just imagine what would happen if everybody would go vegan.
Panded.
It's terrible,
Remember
really.
that shogun who received shipments of beef pickled in sake that were labeled as medicine? This wasn't a label to deceive the common folk. Throughout the meat ban, people were still actively consuming meat as medicine. And it was also reserved as a special food for the elderly to maintain their health. In particular, hunted meat wasn't covered by the meat ban.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Deer, wild boar, fox, raccoon dog, wolf, bear, otter, weasel, and bird meat was harvested from hunting towns in mountainous regions of Japan and sold in the Yotsuya district of Edo, which is present-day Tokyo. This district was regarded as a hunting town where medicinal meat was sold. You're hearing this right. Meat, organs, bones, horns, and more, nose to tail, were considered medicine in Japan even during the meat ban.
And people were so brainwashed that they still didn't make the connection. They call it medicine. So basically they would get sick because they were nutritionally deficient, and then they would eat the whole animal and get healthy again. Wow, another surprise. How can that be? Yes, under those circumstances, meat is medicine, if you will, because you're simply nourishing yourself again. But if you would have nourished yourself in the first place, you wouldn't have gotten sick.
To the point where there are even accounts of Buddhist monks being prescribed and consuming meat when they were sick. And if you think this idea somehow constitutes the definition of woo,
it's that woo woo,
then you'll want to click off now. If you don't and you're finding this video interesting or you learned something new, please annihilate the like button and hit subscribe.
come on, do it.
Do it now. Do it.
But meat as medicine isn't some crazy idea restricted to Japan. And believe it or not, Paul Saladino or some other health influencer didn't come up with the idea of eating nose to tail to improve your health. For millennia, traditional medicine in Asia used a wide variety of animal products to treat illnesses and ailments. From antlers to entrails, even sparrows' nests, meat and animal products have been used by themselves or combined with herbs and extracts to help sick people. But there's more to this story, much more that could foreshadow what might happen if our modern society adopts a primarily plant-based diet in the future.
God forbid.
Despite the Japanese population severely restricting meat consumption in general, here's the real kicker. Wild animal and even cow bones are commonly found in archaeological excavations of Edo period nobles' houses. Not only that, some clans that adopted Christianity ate beef and dairy throughout the meat ban until Japan's isolationist period in the mid-1600s. So meat was, at the very least, still widely consumed among the upper class in some regions of Japan, and everyone else used meat as a medicine.
Alright guys, I'm gonna cut it off here. The video is long enough and I pretty much said everything I wanted to say throughout the video. Apologies there, I just interrupted it every couple of seconds. But yeah, this is really what it boils down to, especially for me, because I was a vegan, shame on me yet again, for 4 years straight. And I was totally nutritionally deprived. No, dear vegans, it doesn't matter that I supplemented every single nutrient there was. I was taking vitamin B12, D3, DHA, EPA, I was taking vitamin A even, and whatnot. Pretty much everything there was, I was consuming just to cope with my nutritional deficiencies, and my health still deteriorated. And then when I ate my first egg after 4 years, yes, it felt like medicine. Matter of fact, it felt like magic ultimately, because it brought me back to life. How can that be, you might ask? It is because an egg is ultimately nature's multivitamin and has pretty much all the vitamins intact in the yolk that is. So this is what I did after 4 years of veganism, and I started snapping back, and then I started reintroducing even more animal foods. And oh, was I glad that my YouTube activism, if you will, didn't lead to the abolition of meat altogether. Because guess what? This is truly what vegans are advocating for. When people go vegan, they're so extremely brainwashed that they want to remove and ban meat altogether. But then after a couple of years, they're very, very grateful when they realize, hey, well, the majority of society is still eating meat and I am able now to partake in that nourishment as well. Alright guys, but this is it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out the links in the description box below to further support my work. And as always, may God bless you all. Much love and peace.
يا نفس إن لم تظفري لا تجزعي